Welcome back. Today is day 4 of reading the Bible in the year. My name is Tony, and today we're going to be reading out of the book of Job. If you don't know, like I didn't really know exactly where it was, Job is about a third of the way through the Bible. So anyway, we're going to be in Job. I looked ahead a little bit so I can give you a heads up, is that we're going to be in Job until it's over. And then we'll be going back to Genesis. So, Job, the book of Job, chapter 1. A man devoted to God. Job was a man who lived in Uz. He was honest inside and out, a man of his word, and was totally devoted to God and hated evil with a passion. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. He was also very wealthy. 7,000 head of sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 teams of oxen, 500 donkeys, and a huge staff of servants, the most influential man in all of the East. His sons used to take turns hosting parties in their homes, always inviting their 3 sisters to join them in the merrymaking. When the parties were over, Job would get up early in the morning and sacrifice a burnt offering for each of his children, thinking maybe one of them sinned by defying God inwardly. Job made a habit of this sacrificial atonement, just in case they sinned. The first test, family and fortune. One day when the angels came to report to God, Satan, who was the designated accuser, came along with them. God singled out Satan and said, "What have you been up to?" Satan answered God, "Going here and there, checking things out on earth." God said to Satan, "Have you noticed my friend Job? There's no one quite like him, honest and true to his word. He's totally devoted to God and hating evil." Satan retorted, "So, do you think Job does all that out of the sheer goodness of his heart? Why, no one ever had it so good. You pamper him like a pet. Make sure nothing bad ever happens to him or his family or his possessions. That's everything he does. He can't lose. But what do you think would happen if you reached down and took away everything that is his? He'd curse you right to your face, that's what." God replied, "We'll see. Go ahead, do what you want with him, with all that is his. Just don't hurt him." God replied, let's do that again. God replied, "We'll see. Go ahead, do what you want with him, with all that is his. Just don't hurt him." Then Satan left the presence of God. Sometime later, while Job's children were having one of their parties at home of the oldest son, a messenger came to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing and the donkeys grazing in the field next to us when Sabeans attacked. They stole the animals and killed the field hands. I'm the only one to get out alive and tell you what happened." And while he was talking, another messenger arrived and said, "Bolts of lightning struck the sheep and the shepherds and fried them, burned them to a crisp. I'm the only one to get out alive and to tell you what happened." While he was still talking, another messenger arrived and said, "Chaldeans came from 3 directions, raided the camels, and massacred the camel drivers. I'm the only one to get out alive and tell you what happened." While he was still talking, another messenger arrived and said, "Your children were having a party at the home of the oldest brother when a tornado swept in off the desert and struck the house. It collapsed on the young people and they died. I'm the only one to get out alive and tell you what happened." Job got to his feet, ripped his robe, shaved his head, then fell to the ground and worshipped. "Naked I came from my mother's womb. Naked I'll return to the womb of the earth. God gives, God takes. God's name be blessed." Not once through all this did Job sin. Not once did he blame God. The second test, health. One day when the angels came to report to God, Satan also showed up. God singled out Satan, saying, "And what have you been up to?" Satan answered God, "Oh, going here and there, checking things out." Then God said to Satan, "Have you noticed my friend Job? There's no one quite like him, is there? Honest and true to his word, totally devoted to God and hating evil. He still has a firm grip on his integrity. You tried to trick me into destroying him, but it didn't work." Satan answered, "A human would do anything to save his life. But what do you think would happen if you reached down and took away his health? He'd curse you to your face, that's what." God said, "All right, go ahead. You can do what you like with him. But mind you, don't kill him." Satan left God and struck Job with terrible sores, Job with ulcers and scabs from head to foot. They itched and oozed so badly that he took a piece of broken pottery to scrape himself, then went and sat on a trash heap among the ashes. His wife said, "Still holding on to your precious integrity, are you? Curse God and be done with it." He told her, "You're talking like an empty-headed fool. We take the good days from God, why not also the bad days?" Not once through all this did Job sin. He said nothing against God. Job's three friends. Three of Job's friends heard of all the trouble that had fallen on him. Each traveled from his own country. Eliphaz from Teman, Bildad from Shuhah, and Zophar from Namath, and went together to Job to keep him company and comfort him. When they first caught sight of him, they couldn't believe what they saw. They hardly recognized him. They cried out in lament, ripped their robes, and dumped dirt on their heads as a sign of their grief. Then they sat with him on the ground. 7 days and nights they sat there without saying a word. They could see how rotten he felt, how deeply he was suffering. Job cries out. Chapter 3. What's the point of life? Then Job broke the silence. He spoke up and cursed his fate. "Obliterate the day I was born. Blank out the night I was conceived. Let it be a black hole in space. May God above forget it ever happened. Erase it from the books. May the day of my birth be buried in deep darkness, shrouded by the fog, swallowed by the night. And the night take my conception. The devil take it. Rip the date off the calendar. Delete it from the almanac. Oh, turn that night into pure nothingness. No sounds of pleasure from that night, ever. May those who are good at cursing curse that day. Unleash the sea beast Leviathan on it. May its morning stars turn to black cinders, waiting for daylight that never comes, never once seeing the first light of dawn. And why? Because it released me from my mother's womb into a life with so much trouble. Why didn't I die at birth? My first breath out of the womb, my last. Why were there these arms to rock me and breasts for me to milk from? I could be resting in peace now, asleep forever, feeling no pain, in the company of kings and statesmen in their royal ruins, or with princes resplendent in their gold and silver tombs. Why wasn't I stillborn and buried, with all the babies who never saw light, where the wicked no longer trouble anyone, and bone-weary people get a long-deserved rest? Prisoners sleep undisturbed, never again to wake up to the bark of guards. And the small and the greats are equal in that place. The slaves are free from their masters. Why does God bother giving light to the miserable? Why bother keeping bitter people alive? Those who want in the worst way to die and can't. Who can't imagine anything better than death? Who count the day of their death and burial the happiest day of their life? What's the point of life when it doesn't make sense? When God blocks all the roads to meaning? Instead of bread, I get groans for my supper. Then leave the table and vomit my anguish. The worst of my fears have come true. What I've dreaded most has happened. My repose is shattered, my peace destroyed. No rest for me ever. Death has evaded me. 4. Eliphaz speaks out. Now you're the one in trouble. Then Eliphaz from Teman spoke up. Would you mind if I said something to you? Under the circumstances, it's hard to keep quiet. You yourself have done this plenty of times, spoken words that clarify, encouraged those who were about to quit. Your words have put stumbling people on their feet, put fresh hope in people about to collapse. But now you're the one in trouble. You're hurting. You've been hit hard and you're reeling from the blow. But shouldn't your devout life give you confidence now? Shouldn't your exemplary life give you hope? Think, has a truly innocent person ever ended up on the scrap heap? Do generally upright people ever lose out in the end? It's my observation that those who plow evil and sow trouble reap evil and trouble. One breath from God and they fall apart. One blast of his anger and there's nothing left of them. The mighty lion, king of the beasts, roars mightily, but when he's toothless, he's useless. No teeth, no prey, and the cubs wander off to fend for themselves. A word came to me in secret, a mere whisper of a word, but I heard it clearly. It came in a scary dream one night. After I had fallen into a deep, deep sleep, dread stared me in the face, and terror. I was scared to death, and I shook from head to foot. A spirit gilded right in front of me. The hair on my head stood on end. I couldn't tell what it was that happened there, a blur, and then I heard a muffled voice. How can mere mortals be more righteous than God? How can humans be purer than their Creator? Why, God doesn't even trust His own servants, doesn't even cheer His angels. So how much less these bodies composed of mud, fragile as moss? These bodies of ours are here today and gone tomorrow, and no one even notices, gone without a trace. When the tent stakes are ripped up, the tent collapses. We die and are never the wiser for having lived. 5. Don't blame fate when things go wrong. Call for help, Job, if you think anyone will answer. To which of the holy angels will you turn? The hot temper of a fool eventually kills him. The jealous anger of an idiot does her in. I've seen it myself, seen fools putting down roots, and then suddenly their houses are cursed. Their children out in the cold, abused and exploited, with no one to stick up for them. Hungry people off the street plunder their harvests, cleaning them out completely, taking thorns and all, insatiable for everything they have. Don't blame fate when things go wrong. Trouble doesn't come from nowhere. It's human. Mortals are born and bred for trouble, as certainly as sparks fly upward. What a blessing when God corrects you. If I were in your shoes, I'd go straight to God. I'd throw myself on the mercy of God. After all, He's famous for great and unexpected acts. There's no end to His surprises. He gives rain, for instance, across the wide earth, sends water to irrigate the fields. He raises up the down and out, gives firm footing to those seeking in grief. He aborts the schemes of conniving crooks so that none of their plots come to term. He catches the know-it-alls in their conspiracies. All the intricate intrigue swept out with the trash. Suddenly they're disoriented, plunged into darkness. They can't see to put one foot in front of the other, but the downtrodden are saved by God, saved from the murderous plots, saved from the iron fist. And so the poor continue to hope, while injustice is bound and gagged. So what a blessing when God steps in and corrects you. Mind you, don't despise the discipline of Almighty God. True, He wounds, but He also dresses the wound. The same hand that hurts you heals you. From one disaster after another, He delivers you. No matter what the calamity, the evil can't touch you. In famine, He'll keep you from starving. In war, from being gutted by the sword. You'll be protected from vicious gossip and live fearlessly through any catastrophe. You'll shrug off disaster and famine and stroll fearlessly among wild animals. You'll be on good terms with rocks and mountains. Wild animals will become your good friends. You'll know that your place on earth is safe. You'll look over your goods and find nothing amiss. You'll see your children grow up, your family lovely and graceful as orchard grass. You'll arrive at your grapevine with many good years, like sheaves of golden grain at harvest. Yes, this is the way things are, my word of honor. Take it to heart and you won't go wrong. Bible recap, Job 1 through 5. Today's reading lands us about 400 years post-flood, and we meet a man named Job. Initially, he sounds a lot like Noah. He's blameless and upright and fears God. In Noah's story, things got really dark. Then there was some relief at the end, and we'll see the same pattern play out in Job's story. After what we covered in day 2, you may have noticed that chapter 1 verse 6 referred to angels as the sons of God, including Satan, who in his created form is an angel. God initiates a conversation about Job with Satan. The word Satan means adversary, one who resists, accuser. Some scholars believe it's not necessarily a proper name that refers to one particular being, but that it's a general term referring to God's adversary, who in this instance is a fallen angel opposing God's reign. Later in Scripture, there are references to a fallen angel named Lucifer, but there's reason to believe that the word Satan doesn't always refer to Lucifer. There are many fallen angels who are God's adversaries. In fact, a lot of people believe Revelation 12 indicates that 1/3 of all the angels created rebelled against Him and were cast from heaven, so there are a lot of Satans. After God initiates the conversation about Job with one of his enemies, the enemy concocts a plan to test Job, and God allows it. There's something noteworthy here. God doesn't create the plan for testing Job, but God allows it. He isn't the active agent in the evil perpetrated by Satan, but He's still sovereign over it, and in His mercy, He limits it. Satan is on a leash. He isn't allowed to take Job's life. Satan attacks Job in a variety of ways. Job's losses come twice as acts of men, Sabians and Chaldeans, and twice as acts of nature, fire from heaven and wind. God grants Satan the opportunity to influence both of those things, the acts of man and the acts of nature. For God to allow Satan to influence those things means that God himself is the one who has control over those things. But you can't give someone influence over something that isn't your domain. Job's response is humble here. In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. He acknowledges that everything comes from God's hand and he receives it. He's handling his grief pretty well until 3 of his friends show up on the scene. They come to show him sympathy and comfort him, and they do a great job of that during the 7 days when they sit in silence with him. The problem is when they start to speak. Maybe you've had friends like that, or maybe you've been a friend like that. There are some good lessons for us here in how to comfort someone who has experienced trauma or loss. Sitting with them in silence is a safe bet, but Job's friends start giving him bad counsel. We heard from the first one today, Eliphaz. He claims to have a word from God about what Job has done wrong. He insinuates that Job has brought this trouble on himself, but we know from the story that Eliphaz is wrong here. Tomorrow we'll see how Job responds to his opinionated friend. Today's God Shot. God's sovereignty over evil should serve as a great comfort to his kids. God limits the actions of the enemy, and every action the enemy takes against Job serves God's greater purpose as we see them unfold in the rest of Job's story. This story gets dark, but it has a happy ending. Keep looking for God in the dark spots of this story, because he's where the joy is. And that concludes today's lesson. We'll be done with day 4. Tomorrow we'll go further into the story of Job, covering Job chapters 6 through 9. See you then.